The Millionaire CEO almost died in her arms. Months later, a baby appeared that shook his dynasty. How long have you known? 7 months, Martin. I've known for 7 months. 7 months. You've been carrying my child for 7 months, and you were never going to tell me. That's right, I wasn't. How could you make that decision? How could you decide I didn't deserve to know I was going to be a father? Because you have a life, a girlfriend, a dynasty waiting for you. I wasn't going to disrupt all of that because of one night of terrible judgment. Terrible judgment? Is that what you call our child? That's what I call the choice we made that night. The baby is mine, Martin. Mine. I've carried this child. I've rearranged my entire life. I've built a future that includes this baby. You're just the biological contributor, nothing more. Have you ever made a choice that felt like protection but was actually a prison? Have you ever kept a secret so big it changed the shape of your entire life? What if saving someone's life meant they'd come back and shatter everything you'd carefully built? Before this story ends, you're going to have to decide what you believe about second chances, about love across impossible divides, and about whether people can truly change. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it all started. A rainy Seattle night, an alley that smelled like garbage and desperation, and a woman who had no idea that saving one life would completely transform her own. The rain had turned Seattle's downtown streets into rivers of neon darkness when Dr. Teresa George found the man bleeding out in the alley behind her medical clinic. She'd been taking out the trash. Unglamorous work for someone with doctor before her name, but that was life at a community health center where everyone did everything. The clinic served Seattle's forgotten populations, immigrants without papers, homeless veterans, sex workers, addicts trying to get clean, anyone who fell through the cracks of a healthcare system that demanded insurance cards and proof of address. Teresa had chosen this work deliberately. At 32, she could have been making 3 times her salary at any private practice or hospital. Her credentials were impeccable. Johns Hopkins for undergrad, Stanford Medical School, a residency at Massachusetts General that had doctors twice her age asking for her consultation. But credentials didn't matter much when you'd grown up in a neighborhood where the nearest doctor was a 40-minute bus ride away, where your mother died of treatable pneumonia because she was afraid a hospital visit would bankrupt the family. So Teresa had come back to Seattle's International District and opened a clinic that operated on grants, donations, and her own rapidly depleting savings. She worked 70-hour weeks, spoke medical Spanish and survival Mandarin, had become an expert at performing miracles with expired medications and borrowed equipment. Which is why, when she found the man in the alley with a stab wound in his abdomen and approximately 10 minutes left to live, her first thought wasn't call 911. Her first thought was, I can save him. She dropped to her knees in the rain-soaked alley, her scrubs immediately soaking through. The man was unconscious, his expensive suit ruined by blood and Seattle weather. Even in the dim light from her clinic's back door, she could see he didn't belong here. Everything about him screamed money. The cut of his jacket, the watch on his wrist that probably cost more than her annual salary, the kind of haircut that required a standing appointment with someone who went by one name. Hey, can you hear me? His eyes flickered open, unfocused, even barely conscious. They were striking, dark brown, almost black, with the kind of intensity that suggested he was used to people paying attention when he looked at them. They stabbed me. 3 guys wanted my wallet, and I fought back. Stupid. Don't talk. Save your energy. Teresa was already assessing the wound, her hands moving with practiced efficiency despite the rain and darkness. Entry point lower left quadrant, possible perforation of intestinal wall, definite vascular involvement given the blood loss. He needed a hospital, needed surgery, needed about 10 things she couldn't provide in an alley. But moving him would kill him. She could see it in the pallor of his skin, the way his breathing had gone shallow. He was minutes from shock, and the nearest trauma center was 15 minutes away on a clear day. In this rain with Friday night traffic, it might as well be on the moon. I'm going to help you, but I need you to stay conscious. What's your name? Martin. Martin Raymond. The name meant nothing to her. Should it have? She filed the question away for later when he wasn't actively dying. Okay, Martin. I'm Dr. George. I'm going to get you inside and stop this bleeding. This is going to hurt. She was a small woman, 5'3" in shoes she wasn't currently wearing. But years of hauling equipment and lifting patients had given her strength that surprised people. She got her arms under Martin Raymond's shoulders and dragged him toward her clinic's back door, leaving a trail of blood that the rain immediately began to wash away. The clinic was closed. Everyone else gone home hours ago. Teresa hauled Martin through the narrow hallway to her exam room. The cleanest and best-equipped space in the building, though that wasn't saying much. She got him onto the table, grabbed supplies with the efficient movements of someone who'd done emergency medicine in conditions far worse than this. Martin, stay with me. Tell me what happened. Meeting. Investment property. Wrong neighborhood. 3 guys. I was stupid to fight. Very stupid. But we'll fix it. For the next 40 minutes, Teresa George performed what could only be called a miracle. Though she'd call it stubbornness mixed with medical training and desperation. She stopped the bleeding, cleaned and sutured the wound, started in 4 with fluids they kept for emergencies, pumped him full of antibiotics that were technically expired but still effective. Through it all, Martin drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes lucid enough to answer her questions, sometimes gone somewhere else entirely. When he was present, he watched her with those intense eyes, like he was memorizing every detail of her face. You should be in a hospital. This is beyond what I can handle here. You need imaging, proper surgical consultation, monitoring, no hospitals, no police reports, no questions. You were stabbed. There will be questions regardless, not if no one knows I was stabbed. How much do you want? Teresa stopped what she was doing, stared at him. Excuse me? To keep this quiet? To not file a report? Everyone has a price. What's yours? The words hit her like a slap. She'd just spent 40 minutes saving his life with expired medications and sheer determination. Had gotten his blood all over her clinic and probably violated a dozen medical protocols. And he thought she wanted payment for silence. Get out. I can't exactly walk, then crawl. But get out of my clinic. Something in her voice must have penetrated, because Martin's expression changed. The arrogant assumption replaced by confusion. I didn't mean to offend. You came into my neighborhood. Probably to buy property you'll flip for profit while displacing families who've lived here for generations. You got stabbed because you thought your money would protect you anywhere. I saved your life because that's what I do, not because I want anything from you. And your first assumption is that I'm corrupt enough to need bribing. So yes, you offended me. Now get out. I apologize. You're right. That was insulting. I'm not thinking clearly. You lost approximately 30% of your blood volume. Clear thinking isn't on the menu. She turned away, began cleaning up the catastrophic mess of bloody gauze and used instruments. Behind her, she heard Martin moving, trying to sit up despite the pain. At least let me pay for the supplies I used. That's not a bribe. That's just fair. We operate on donations. There's a box by the front door. Put whatever your conscience demands in it. And for your time, your expertise, I don't charge people for emergency care. Defeats the purpose. She could feel him staring at her, trying to understand. You're not what I expected. And you're exactly what I expected. Rich, entitled, assuming everything and everyone has a price tag. Now please leave before you bleed on anything else. But Martin Raymond didn't leave. He couldn't really. Still too weak, too injured. And the rain outside had intensified to the kind of downpour that made leaving seem impossible. Teresa ignored him as much as possible, cleaning her clinic, restocking supplies, doing everything that needed doing while pretending he wasn't there. Around 2 a.m, she heard him say quietly, I really am sorry. For what I said, for assuming. Teresa paused in her cleaning, her back still to him. People like you always assume. It's how you navigate the world. Everything's a transaction. Everyone wants something. You probably can't imagine someone doing something without expecting payment. No, I can't. My world doesn't work that way. Then your world is smaller than you think. Before this story goes any further, before I show you what happens when 2 people from completely different universes try to find common ground, I need to speak directly to you. If you've ever felt invisible to people with power, if you've ever wondered whether someone from a different world could truly understand yours, if you believe that sometimes the bravest thing we do is save someone who might destroy us, then hit that like button right now. Share this story with someone who needs to believe that class doesn't have to divide us, that real transformation is possible, that love can grow in the most unexpected places. Subscribe to Mr. Kingsley Luxe Stories because we tell the truth about complicated people making impossible choices. And trust me, what happens next between Teresa and Martin will challenge everything you think you know about second chances. Now back to that clinic where two strangers are about to start something that will change a dynasty forever. The sky was beginning to lighten when Teresa finally finished cleaning. Not true dawn yet, but that pre-dawn gray that suggested morning was negotiable. She checked Martin's vitals again, changed his bandages, gave him instructions for wound care that she suspected he wouldn't follow. You need to see a real doctor, someone with actual surgical equipment and the ability to prescribe proper pain medication. What I did here was emergency intervention, not treatment. I'll handle it. There was a pause. Then Martin said something that surprised her. Can I see you again? Not as a patient, just to talk. Teresa stared at him. Why would you want that? Because in one night, you've challenged everything I thought I understood about how the world works. That's worth exploring. I'm not a philosophy experiment for a bored millionaire. No, you're a doctor who saves lives in an alley during a rainstorm. You're remarkable, and I'd like to know you better. The words were smooth, practiced. Teresa had been hit on by enough men to recognize the pattern. Rich men especially seemed to think she should be flattered by their attention, like her medical degree and her work meant nothing compared to their wealth. No. May I ask why? Because we have nothing in common. Because you live in a world where everything has a price, and I live in a world where nothing does. Because I don't have time for whatever this is. She expected him to argue, to persist. Wealthy men usually did. But Martin just nodded slowly, like he'd expected the rejection. Fair enough. But may I at least donate to your clinic? Properly, I mean. Not as payment for tonight, but because the work you're doing is important. The donation box is by the front door. I meant something more substantial. This clinic could do more with proper funding, couldn't it? Better equipment, more staff, expanded services. He wasn't wrong. Teresa ran her clinic on a shoestring budget that frayed constantly. Proper funding could transform everything she was trying to do, but accepting money from Martin Raymond felt like a compromise she wasn't ready to make. Send a check if you want. Make it out to International District Community Health. Don't expect a thank you note. I won't expect anything. A car arrived around 6 in the morning. Black luxury sedan. Driver in a suit who took one look at Martin's condition and went professionally blank-faced. Teresa watched from her clinic door as Martin was helped into the vehicle, moving carefully to protect his injury. Before the car pulled away, he looked back at her one more time. Their eyes met through the rain-spattered window, and Teresa felt something shift in her chest. Not attraction, she wouldn't give him that, but recognition maybe, of someone more complicated than she'd initially assumed. Then the car was gone, and Teresa was alone in her clinic with blood-stained floors and the certain knowledge that she'd never see Martin Raymond again. She was wrong about that. The check arrived 3 days later. $500,000 made out to International District Community Health. Teresa stared at it for a full 5 minutes, certain it was fake, some kind of elaborate joke. But when she called the bank, they confirmed it was legitimate. $500,000. More money than her clinic had received in the entire 5 years of its existence. Money that could fix the broken heating system, replace expired equipment, hire another doctor, expand services, actually pay Teresa a salary that didn't require her to live on rice and canned soup. Money that came from a man who'd offered to bribe her for her silence, who represented everything she'd spent her career fighting against. Teresa almost sent it back. But that would be pride. And pride didn't help her patients. Mrs. Chen needed her diabetes medication. Raphael needed consistent mental health care. Lynn needed trauma counseling. The clinic needed resources to serve them all properly. So Teresa deposited the check and tried not to think about Martin Raymond. She failed at the not thinking part. Over the next month, she found herself wondering about him, whether he'd seen a proper doctor, whether the wound had healed correctly, whether he'd actually declined to invest in the luxury condo project, or if that had been empty words spoken in a moment of pain and vulnerability. She got her answer when a news article appeared in the Seattle Times. Raymond Dynasty heir blocks International District Development. The article explained that Martin Raymond, son of real estate magnate Thomas Raymond and heir to a multi-billion-dollar property empire, had used his influence to kill a proposed luxury development in Seattle's International District. citing concerns about displacement and community impact. The article included a photo of Martin at some charity gala, looking exactly like what he was: wealthy, powerful, devastatingly handsome in a tuxedo that probably cost more than Teresa's monthly rent. He stood next to a woman identified as Vanessa Kincaid, philanthropist and longtime companion, and they looked like they belonged together. Both beautiful, both wealthy, both existing in a world Teresa had never been part of. Teresa told herself she didn't care. Martin Raymond's personal life was none of her business. She'd saved his life. He donated to her clinic. Their interaction was complete, but she kept the article anyway, folded in her desk drawer beneath patient files and grant applications. 2 months after that night in the rain, Teresa discovered she was pregnant. She stared at the positive pregnancy test in her clinic bathroom, her medical brain already calculating timelines while the rest of her tried to process the impossibility. She'd been careful. She was always careful. Her last relationship had ended 8 months ago. A physician at Seattle General who'd wanted someone less obsessed with work and more willing to attend medical fundraisers. Teresa did the math 3 times, hoping she was wrong. But the timeline didn't lie. 8 weeks pregnant, which meant conception had occurred approximately. No, it wasn't possible. Except it was. That night in the rain, after Martin had fallen asleep around 4 in the morning, and Teresa had dozed in her office chair. She'd woken around 5:30 to find him awake and watching her with those intense dark eyes. "You're remarkable." And she'd been exhausted, strung out on adrenaline and the emotional intensity of saving someone's life. And when he'd reached for her hand, she hadn't pulled away. What happened next had been a kind of madness. Both of them still riding the intensity of survival, of intimacy that came from literally holding someone's life in your hands. It had been desperate and urgent and completely unlike Teresa, who never lost control, who never made impulsive decisions. 10 minutes that she'd immediately regretted, that she'd convinced herself meant nothing, that she'd filed away as an aberration born from exhaustion and emotion. 10 minutes that had apparently resulted in pregnancy. Teresa sat on her clinic bathroom floor and tried to breathe. Part 2, 2,500 words. This couldn't be happening. She had work to do, patients who needed her, a clinic barely holding together financially despite Martin's donation. She didn't have time for a baby, didn't have resources for a baby, didn't have any kind of relationship with the father beyond 1 night of crisis and 1 catastrophic lapse in judgment. And Martin Raymond existed in a completely different world. He had a longtime companion who looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. He had a dynasty to inherit, a father who probably had very specific expectations about grandchildren and legacy. Teresa couldn't imagine calling him, couldn't imagine explaining this, couldn't imagine navigating the complexity of what this pregnancy meant. So she didn't call. She made an appointment with her own doctor, confirmed the pregnancy, began taking prenatal vitamins, and made a decision. She would handle this alone, just like she'd handled everything else in her life. Medical school debt, building the clinic, 70-hour work weeks. She was good at handling things alone. The pregnancy was easy at first. Teresa had always been healthy, and her body adapted to the changes without the dramatic symptoms some women experienced. She continued working full days, saw patients, applied for grants, told no one about her condition. But by 4 months, she was showing, not dramatically. Her small frame and the oversized scrubs she wore hid most of it, but enough that Elena Martinez noticed. Elena was the clinic's nurse practitioner, a woman 15 years Teresa's senior who'd become her closest friend and the clinic's unofficial emotional support system. She cornered Teresa in the supply closet one afternoon and said simply, "How far along?" Teresa could have denied it, should have denied it. Instead, she said, 18 weeks. And the father, not in the picture. Elena's eyes were sharp, missing nothing. By choice or circumstance? Does it matter? It might. If he's someone who should know, someone who'd want to be involved. He won't. He can't. We're from completely different worlds. This was a mistake, and I'm handling it. You're handling it. Alone, while working 70-hour weeks and running a clinic on fumes. That's your plan? That's my plan. Elena looked like she wanted to argue, but she knew Teresa well enough to recognize immovable determination. Fine, but you're cutting back to 50 hours maximum. You're accepting help when offered. And you're actually eating meals instead of surviving on coffee and spite. Those are my terms. You don't get to set terms. I absolutely do. Someone has to take care of you, and apparently that's my job now." Teresa felt tears threaten, pregnancy hormones making her emotional in ways she hated. "I don't need taking care of. Everyone needs taking care of sometimes, even doctors who save lives in alleys." The reference to that night made Teresa's breath catch. She hadn't told Elena about Martin Raymond, hadn't told anyone, but Elena was perceptive, and the timing wasn't hard to calculate. The donation, the $500,000, that came right after. Was it him? Is he the father? Teresa couldn't lie to Elena. She just nodded. "Teresa, Martin Raymond is one of the wealthiest men in Seattle. His family owns half the property in this state. If he's the father, he has a right to know. No, he has a life, a girlfriend, a dynasty to inherit. I'm not disrupting that because of one night of terrible judgment. This baby is mine. I'll raise it alone. And when the baby asks about their father, I'll handle that when it happens." Elena looked unconvinced, but dropped the subject. Over the next few months, she became Teresa's shadow, making sure she ate, monitoring her blood pressure, forcing her to take breaks she didn't want. The clinic continued operating, now with better equipment and the ability to hire a part-time physician's assistant. Teresa threw herself into work, trying not to think about the future, about diapers and daycare, and how exactly one raised a child while running a non-profit clinic. She was 7 months pregnant when Martin Raymond walked back into her life. Teresa was in her office reviewing patient files when Elena appeared in the doorway with an expression Teresa had never seen before, somewhere between shock and barely contained panic. "There's someone here to see you, and before you say you're too busy, you need to see this person. Now." "Elena, I have 17 patient files to review." "Teresa, it's Martin Raymond." The name hit her like a physical blow. Teresa's hand went instinctively to her stomach, to the visible swell that no amount of loose clothing could hide anymore. "No, tell him I'm not available. Tell him anything." "He can't. I can't. He knows. He saw me in the hallway. He knows you're pregnant. And Teresa, he looks like he's figured out the timeline." Before Teresa could respond, Martin appeared in the doorway behind Elena. He looked exactly as she remembered, those intense dark eyes, that aura of wealth and power. But something was different. He looked shattered. His eyes went immediately to Teresa's stomach, then to her face, and she watched him do the math. That's when the conversation you heard at the beginning of this story happened. The confrontation that had been building for 7 months. "How long have you known?" 7 months, Martin. I've known for 7 months. 7 months. You've been carrying my child for 7 months, and you were never going to tell me?" "That's right. I wasn't." "How could you make that decision? How could you decide I didn't deserve to know I was going to be a father? Because you have a life, a girlfriend, a dynasty waiting for you. I wasn't going to disrupt all of that because of one night of terrible judgment." "Terrible judgment? Is that what you call our child?" "That's what I call the choice we made that night. The baby is mine, Martin. Mine. I've carried this child. I've rearranged my entire life. I've built a future that includes this baby. You're just the biological contributor. Nothing more." The words hung in the air like weapons. Martin stared at her, and Teresa watched something in his expression shift from anger to something more complicated. Pain mixed with determination. "I came here today to check on the clinic, to see how the donation was being used, to see if you needed additional resources. I didn't expect this. But now that I know, you can't expect me to walk away. That's my child you're carrying, and you have a dynasty to inherit, a father with expectations, a life that doesn't include a community health doctor who got pregnant from a one-night mistake. Stop calling it a mistake. What would you call it? A consequence of the most intense night of my life, of meeting someone who challenged everything I thought I understood about the world. You saved my life, Teresa. Did you think I'd just forget that? Did you think I wouldn't try to find you again?" Teresa's heart was racing. "You've been trying to find me for months, but Dr. George at the community health clinic isn't exactly specific information, and you're not on social media. I finally convinced my assistant to research every community health clinic in Seattle until we found the right one. I didn't know about the baby, but I was coming here anyway, because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since that night. Stop. Just stop. You don't get to show up and say things like that. You don't get to make this complicated. It's already complicated. We're having a child together. It doesn't get more complicated than that. Before Teresa could respond, her office phone rang. She grabbed it, grateful for the interruption. But Elena's voice on the other end was urgent. Raphael just came in. Overdose. I need you now. Teresa was moving before she'd fully registered the words. Her doctor brain taking over, she pushed past Martin into the hallway, toward the exam room where Elena was already working on Raphael, the homeless vet who'd trusted Teresa enough to keep coming back. The next 20 minutes were a blur of medical intervention. Narcan, oxygen, monitoring vitals, talking Raphael through the panic and shame as he regained consciousness. Teresa was vaguely aware of Martin standing in the doorway, watching, but she didn't have time to care. When Raphael was stable, when his breathing had normalized and the immediate crisis had passed, Teresa sat with him and held his hand while he cried. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was doing good. I was clean for 3 weeks, but then the nightmares came back and I'm sorry. You're alive. That's what matters. We'll figure out the rest. There's a veteran support group that meets Thursdays. I want you there this week. Promise me. I promise. After Raphael was settled in their small recovery area, essentially a cot in a storage room but better than the street, Teresa found Martin still waiting in her office. You should go. That's what you do. Every day. Save people who fall through the cracks. It's my job. No, your job is medicine. This is something more. He paused. I've spent the last 4 months learning about this neighborhood, about the work you do, about why you do it. Do you want to know what I've found? Not particularly. You're a legend here. The doctor who never turns anyone away, who treats gang members and police officers with equal care, who's saved more lives than you probably remember. There are people in this neighborhood who call you a saint. I'm not a saint. I'm a doctor doing the work that needs doing. And you're going to keep doing it while raising a child alone, working 50-hour weeks with a newborn? Elena made me cut back. And yes, I'll manage. Women have been managing work and children for generations, not alone. Not if they don't have to be. Let me help. Let me be part of this. Why? Because you feel obligated? Because your father expects a Raymond heir? Because you think money solves everything? Because that's my child. And because when I found out you were pregnant, my first thought wasn't about obligation or expectation or money. It was that I wanted this, wanted to know you, wanted to be part of your life, wanted to see if what I felt that night in the rain was real or just crisis-induced delusion. And what did you feel? That I'd found someone extraordinary, someone who operated on principles I'd never encountered, who valued human life over profit, who could perform miracles with expired medications and sheer determination. You fascinated me. You still do. Teresa wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to believe him. But belief felt dangerous. Like opening a door she'd specifically locked for good reasons. I don't need rescuing. I don't need a millionaire's charity or pity. I'm not offering either. I'm offering partnership, co-parenting, a chance to figure this out together. We barely know each other. Then let's change that. Let me take you to dinner. Let's talk. No pressure. No expectations. Just two people trying to navigate an unexpected situation. Teresa looked at him. Really looked at him. Saw past the expensive suit and the confident posture to something more vulnerable. He was scared, she realized. Genuinely scared that she'd say no, that he'd miss this chance. It made him more human, more real. One dinner. That's all I'm agreeing to. One dinner. And his smile was incandescent. Before I continue with what happens at that dinner, with whether Teresa will risk letting Martin into her carefully controlled world, I need you to understand something. This story isn't just about a doctor and a millionaire. It's about all of us. About the walls we build to protect ourselves that become prisons. About the choice between safety and possibility. If you've ever had to decide whether to trust someone who hurt you, whether to believe people can genuinely change, whether love is worth the risk of devastation, then this story is for you. Hit that like button if you're team vulnerability over safety. Share this with someone who's struggling to let their walls down. Comment below and tell me, would you have told Martin about the pregnancy from the beginning, or would you have kept it secret like Teresa? Your answers matter because they help us understand our own capacity for forgiveness and trust. Subscribe to Mr. Kingsley Luxe Stories for narratives that challenge you to be braver than you think you can be. Now let's see if Teresa's brave enough to let Martin prove himself. The dinner happened 3 days later at a small Vietnamese restaurant in the International District. Teresa's choice, deliberately. She wanted Martin in her world, not some fancy downtown establishment where she'd feel out of place. He arrived in jeans and a casual shirt, clearly making an effort not to look like the millionaire he was. It almost worked. Thank you for agreeing to this. I haven't agreed to anything except dinner. This doesn't mean co-parenting or partnership or whatever you're imagining. I understand. So, let's just talk. Tell me about your day. It was such a normal question that it caught her off guard. She'd expected him to want to discuss the baby, logistics, plans. Instead, he genuinely seemed to want to know about her day. So she told him about Mrs. Chen's diabetes finally stabilizing on the new medication regimen, about a patient who'd come in with what they thought was a cold, but was actually early-stage pneumonia, about the grant application she was writing to expand mental health services. Martin listened like her work was the most fascinating thing he'd ever heard, asked questions that showed he'd actually been paying attention, not just making polite conversation. Your turn. Tell me about your day. I fired 3 executives for proposing a development project that would displace low-income families in Tacoma. Teresa's chopsticks paused halfway to her mouth. Seriously? Seriously. Raymond Holdings has traditionally prioritized profit over people. I'm trying to change that. It's not popular with my board or my father, but I'm discovering I don't particularly care about popularity anymore. What changed? I almost died in an alley, and a doctor I'd never met saved my life without expecting anything in return. That tends to rearrange your priorities. They talked through dinner, then over tea. Then over the Vietnamese coffee, Teresa insisted he try despite his protests that he'd never sleep. The conversation flowed easily, naturally, touching on everything from architecture to medical ethics to their completely different childhoods. Martin had grown up in a mansion with servants and private schools and expectations so heavy they'd shaped every choice he'd ever made. Teresa had grown up in a 2-bedroom apartment with a single mother and community college dreams that had somehow transformed into Stanford Medical School. How did you do it? Go from that to this? Scholarships, student loans that I'll be paying off until I'm 60, and sheer stubborn determination. My mother died when I was 19. Pneumonia that could have been easily treated if she'd had access to basic health care. I decided no one else should die for such a stupid, preventable reason. I'm sorry. About your mother. Don't be. She gave me purpose. Everything I do is to honor what she couldn't have. Martin was quiet for a moment. I want our child to know that. To grow up understanding that purpose matters more than profit. Our child. You keep saying that like it's already decided that we're doing this together, aren't we? You agreed to this dinner. That's a start. That's one dinner. You don't know me, Martin. You don't know what it's like to actually be with me. I work constantly. I'm obsessed with my patients. I bring my work home, both literally and emotionally. I'm stubborn and difficult and completely incapable of small talk at fancy fundraisers. Every man I've dated has eventually left because I'm too much. Then they were idiots. You're not too much. You're exactly enough. And yes, I don't know you well yet. That's why we need time. Not one dinner, but many dinners. Conversations. Learning each other. Building something that works for both of us and this baby. Teresa wanted to argue. Wanted to point out all the ways this couldn't work. All the differences between them that couldn't be bridged. But sitting across from Martin in her favorite restaurant in her neighborhood, watching him try Vietnamese coffee and actually seem to like it, she found herself wanting to believe. Okay, not a relationship. Not yet. But we can try getting to know each other. For the baby's sake. For the baby's sake. Though his smile suggested he was hoping for more than that. Over the next month, Teresa discovered that Martin Raymond was nothing like she'd assumed. Yes, he was wealthy. Yes, he came from a dynasty. But he was also willing to learn. To listen. To exist in her world without trying to change it. He showed up at the clinic and sat quietly observing her work. He asked questions about her patients. Not invasive ones. Just genuine interest in the people she treated. He donated additional funds but did it quietly, without fanfare or expectation of recognition, and he was good with people. Teresa watched him talk to Raphael about military service. Apparently, Martin's grandfather had served in Vietnam and saw the vet relax in a way he rarely did with strangers. She saw him help Mrs. Chen carry her groceries when he happened to run into them at the market. She saw him treat her patients with the same respect he'd probably give to his board of directors. "He's not what I expected," Elena said this one evening after Martin had spent 3 hours at the clinic helping them reorganize their supply closet. "Don't get attached. This is temporary. Once the baby comes, once reality sets in, he'll realize this life isn't what he signed up for." But even as she said it, Teresa found herself hoping she was wrong. Teresa was 8 months pregnant when Martin brought her to meet his father. She'd tried to refuse. Meeting Thomas Raymond felt like a step towards something permanent, something she wasn't ready for. But Martin had insisted. "He needs to know about the baby. About you. Better to get it over with now." Thomas Raymond's office occupied the entire top floor of a downtown Seattle high-rise. Everything about it screamed power and money. Original artwork, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Sound, furniture that cost more than Teresa's annual salary. The man himself was in his early 70s, still sharp-eyed and commanding despite his age. He looked at Teresa the way someone might examine a mildly interesting museum exhibit. "So, you're the doctor my son has been obsessing over. I'm the doctor who's pregnant with your grandchild. Whether your son is obsessed is his business." Thomas's eyebrows rose slightly. "Direct. I appreciate that. My son tells me you run a clinic in the International District." "I do. And you intend to continue this work after the child is born?" "I do." "While my son does what exactly? Changes diapers and plays house?" "Father," Martin said this sharply, but Teresa held up a hand. "With respect, Mr. Raymond, how your son and I choose to raise our child is our decision, not yours. I didn't ask to meet you. Your son insisted. If you're expecting me to seek your approval or permission, you'll be disappointed." Silence filled the office. Then, unexpectedly, Thomas Raymond laughed. "I like her. She has spine. Most people who walk into this office are terrified. Most people haven't saved lives in an alley at 3 a.m. Your office isn't remotely frightening." "No, I suppose it wouldn't be." "To you." Thomas studied her more carefully. "My son has changed since he met you. Become less interested in profit, more interested in impact. I'm not sure if I should thank you or blame you. Neither. Martin makes his own choices. I haven't asked him to change anything. Perhaps that's why he's changing anyway. People tend to rise or fall to the expectations placed on them. You seem to expect nothing while offering everything. It's remarkably effective." The baby came 3 weeks later, 2 weeks early, and during a snowstorm that shut down half of Seattle. Teresa's water broke at the clinic, naturally, while she was in the middle of suturing a patient's laceration. She calmly finished the procedure, instructed Elena to take over her remaining appointments, and called Martin. He arrived 17 minutes later, having apparently broken multiple traffic laws getting there. "Hospital. Now. It's fine. Labor takes hours. Teresa, I swear to God, if you try to deliver this baby yourself in your clinic, I'm going to have a complete breakdown." She let him drive her to Seattle General, where her own obstetrician was waiting. Labor was long, 14 hours, but uncomplicated. Martin stayed the entire time, holding her hand, letting her yell at him during contractions, looking more terrified than she'd ever seen him. At 3:47 in the morning, nearly exactly the same time she'd found him bleeding in an alley 9 months earlier, Teresa delivered a healthy baby girl. "She's perfect. She's absolutely perfect." Martin whispered this, staring at their daughter with undisguised awe. "Sofia. Sofia Michelle. Sofia. It's beautiful." He held his daughter like she was made of glass, like she was the most precious thing he'd ever touched. And watching him, this wealthy, powerful man reduced to tears by 7 pounds of newborn humanity, Teresa felt something in her chest crack open. She'd spent 9 months telling herself this was practical KO parenting, that she didn't need Martin beyond his presence in their daughter's life. But seeing him with Sofia, seeing the genuine love and wonder on his face, she realized she'd been lying to herself. Somewhere between that first dinner and this moment, she'd fallen in love with Martin Raymond. The realization terrified her. The first month of Sofia's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and steep learning curves. Teresa had returned to her small house in the International District, determined to manage on her own. Martin had other ideas. He showed up every day, morning, afternoon, evening. It didn't matter. He learned to change diapers, to warm bottles, to soothe Sofia when she cried. He sat with Teresa during 3 a.m. feedings and somehow made exhaustion feel less lonely. You don't have to do this. You could hire help, visit on weekends, be a part-time parent like most wealthy men do. I don't want to be a part-time parent. I want to be her father. That means showing up every day, even when it's hard. It's going to get harder. The novelty will wear off. You'll resent the sleepless nights and the constant demands. Teresa, stop waiting for me to fail. I'm not going anywhere. Everyone goes somewhere eventually. Not me. I love her. He paused, his eyes meeting Teresa's. And I love you. The words hung in the air between them. Teresa felt her heart racing, her carefully constructed walls crumbling. You can't. Why not? Because we're too different. Because I don't fit in your world. Because loving me means choosing a life that's complicated and messy and nothing like what you're used to. I don't want what I'm used to. I want you. I want this family we're accidentally building. I want to spend my mornings at your clinic and my evenings with our daughter. I want Sunday dinners in the International District and arguments about public health policy. I want every complicated, messy, beautiful part of you. Martin, you don't have to say it back. I know you're scared. I know trusting people doesn't come easily to you. But Teresa, I need you to know that I'm here. Not because of Sofia, though I love her more than I knew was possible. I'm here because I choose you. Every day, I choose you. Teresa felt tears on her face. Exhaustion and hormones and overwhelming emotion, all combining into something she couldn't contain. I don't know how to do this. Relationship. Family. Letting someone in. I've been alone for so long. You're not alone anymore. You don't have to figure this out by yourself. We'll figure it out together. What if I'm terrible at it? What if I can't be what you need? You're already everything I need. Stubborn, brilliant, compassionate, impossible. You save lives and change communities and somehow raised our daughter for the first month, mostly alone, because you're too proud to ask for help. You're extraordinary, and I'm not letting you go. Teresa buried her face in his shoulder, letting herself be held, letting herself accept comfort for the first time in longer than she could remember. I love you too. I've been trying not to, but I do. Then stop trying not to. Let yourself love me. Let me love you back. Let's see what we can build together. 6 months after Sofia was born, Martin proposed, not with a flashy public gesture or an enormous ring. He knew Teresa well enough to know she'd hate both. Instead, he proposed at 3 a.m. during a feeding, Sofia asleep in Teresa's arms, both of them exhausted and messy and perfect. Marry me, not because of Sofia, though she deserves parents who are committed to each other, not because it's practical, though it is. Marry me because I love you. Because you make me better. Because I want to spend my life building something meaningful with you. You already have a dynasty. I want a family. There's a difference. Teresa looked at him, really looked at him. Saw not the millionaire or the heir or the powerful businessman, but just Martin, the man who changed diapers at 3 a.m. and worked beside her at the clinic and chose her every single day. Yes, but I'm not wearing some ridiculous expensive ring. I wouldn't dream of it. He pulled out a simple gold band. This was my grandmother's. She immigrated to America with nothing, built a life through determination and hard work. My father forgets sometimes that the Raymond dynasty started with people like her, people like you. The ring fit perfectly. 3 years after that rainy night, Teresa and Martin stood together at the opening of the Raymond Foundation for Community Health, a multi-million-dollar initiative funding clinics like Teresa's across the country. Sofia toddled between them, already showing signs of her mother's stubborn compassion and her father's determination to change systems from within. We did this, Martin said quietly, watching community health workers from across the country gather to share resources and strategies. You did this. You chose to use your resources differently. We did this together. I had the resources. You had the vision. Sofia gave us the reason to believe in building something better. He wasn't wrong. Their partnership had created something neither could have built alone. A model for how wealth could serve communities instead of displacing them. How medicine could be accessible instead of gate-kept. How two people from completely different worlds could find common ground. Do you ever regret it? Choosing this life instead of the easy path? Never. Do you? Letting me in when every instinct told you to protect yourself? Teresa looked at her husband, at their daughter, at the room full of health workers dedicated to serving forgotten communities. She thought about the life she'd imagined. Solitary, safe, controlled, and the life she'd actually built. Messy, vulnerable, infinitely more meaningful. Never. And she meant it with everything she was. If this story moved you, if you believe that love can cross impossible divides, if you think people can genuinely transform when they meet someone who challenges them to be better, then I need you to do something right now. Smash that like button. Share this story with someone who needs to believe that their walls don't have to be permanent. That letting someone in is brave, not weak. That the right person won't be scared away by how much you are. Comment below and tell me your story. Have you ever let someone in who surprised you? Have you ever been Martin, trying to prove you've changed? Have you ever been Teresa, terrified to believe? Your stories matter. They create community. They remind us we're not alone in our messy, complicated journeys toward love. Subscribe to Mr. Kingsley Luxe Stories because we tell the truth about transformation, about second chances, about love that doesn't make sense until suddenly it's the only thing that does. Thank you for being here, for listening, for believing that even the most unlikely love stories can become the most beautiful ones. Because here's the truth Teresa learned in those 3 years since finding a bleeding stranger in an alley. The bravest thing we can do is let someone love us. The hardest work isn't surviving alone. It's trusting someone enough to survive together. And sometimes, the person who seems completely wrong turns out to be exactly, perfectly right. Martin Raymond almost died in her arms, but what he actually did was show her how to live. Fully, vulnerably, with love that didn't make sense on paper, but made perfect sense in every way that mattered. Their story didn't end there, because real stories never truly end. They continue, they evolve, they face new challenges. But whatever came next, they faced it together. The doctor who saved lives, and the millionaire who learned that some things matter more than money. The woman who'd been alone, and the man who'd been lost. The parents who'd build something better for their daughter, and for all the children growing up in communities that deserved access to hope. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. It was real. Complicated and beautiful and earned through every difficult moment and brave choice. And it all started with one rainy night, one act of compassion, and 2 people brave enough to believe that different worlds could build one beautiful life together.